Hey everybody, I'm Amie with SeniorList.com, and today I'm here with Nurse Cynthia. We are talking about a bit of a tender topic today. What happens when a loved one can no longer stay in assisted living, or even no longer should stay in assisted living?
Correct. That's a good point.
There
Yes.
could be a difference. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I like to do, have a story about these videos. We recently had to move my own grandmother from assisted living. And it was not as easy, even though I've been in this industry for a long time, it was not as easy as, it should have been. It was difficult. It was emotional. It was confusing for her.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it was, kind of quick. So we're going to talk about some things today that can hopefully help other families that were in my shoes not that long ago. Some ideas, some things to think about for the future, some ways to address some of these concerns that you may have, or that ways that staff may address them with you, concerns that they may have about your loved one.
Yeah.
And then, kind of what the picture looks like after assisted living. So
yes, very heavy topic. So
yeah.
it's a difficult one, and it's challenging, and it is very emotional. Yeah.
So having worked as a nurse in assisted living for so long, I know you have so many stories. Tell me about what are some of the signs that you notice when it starts to become clear to you that a resident can no longer stay, or maybe soon down the road may no longer be able to stay in assisted living.
That's a good point, soon down the road, because I really think that ideally this should be something that's talked about often. Because, we're aging, we have progressive diseases. And so what we present as, 1 year, 2 or 3 years down the line can be completely different. And so it's something that needs to be talked about, and questions need to be asked. And I absolutely love it when family members say to me, sometimes completely out of the blue, everything's going fine, and they'll say, at what point would mom or dad possibly need a higher level of care? And I just love that question. I think it's a great question to ask at any point in time. It gets that dialogue going, and it helps prepare us for something that may or may not come in the future.
Yeah.
But it's always good to start that conversation early, and be the advocate of initiating that conversation within the community that your loved one lives in.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I've seen a lot of different scenarios. Some of them are, very sudden and urgent, and some of them are more slow and progressive, where there's more time. I wish it could always be slow and progressive, and ideally, I wish it could always be that our loved ones could stay in their home.
Because it does become their home.
It is their home.
Even though it wasn't originally their home, over time, it becomes their home. And the people that they know, and the people that they eat with, and that becomes part of their family, their daily life.
Yes.
So
they definitely become a part of my family, for sure.
Yeah.
It's hard when you see that things might not be working out. And so for me, when I receive that question, the number one thing that I reply with is definitely safety. Safety is one of the largest factors. And what do I mean by safety? Safety can look and present, safety issues can look and present differently depending on the individual. But safety oftentimes can be when someone's no longer safe to reside in a community that is unsecure, meaning that they have free access to come and go. And most assisted living communities have multiple doors, and as an assisted living community, one thing we want to promote is independence and freedom, exercise, folks to get outside, to go on walks. And so, it's important that individuals have that access to leave the community. And that's a very big part of assisted living, is that it isn't a secured community. So folks can come and go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All day long. through multiple doors.
Yes. And maybe sometimes into the evening.
So safety there is, and a safety concern there would be when somebody is no longer safe out in the community.
Yeah.
And that can present itself in many ways. Sometimes it's a physical issue where an individual has been a walker most of their life, their adult life. That's something that they love to do, is go outside and walk. And they're no longer safe as far as their balance, their stability, their mobility. They can be completely alert and oriented, cognitively intact, but they're no longer safe to go out walking on their own. And so sometimes that leads to falls outside on the pavement. And so that can be an issue, and that's something that can have multiple solutions, but that is a concern that would come up. Also with safety outside of the community is when there are some cognitive deficits there or some memory impairment, clearly safety becomes an issue, because it could be as simple as somebody not remembering to wait for the light to turn before they cross the street, which can be, or crossing the street not at an intersection, just kind of trying to do it old school, like we did when we were younger, and not cross at a light. Also, depending on where you live, if you're in a community that's in a city, sometimes I wonder or I worry about the safety of an older adult out in a city environment, and they're out taking a walk, and they may not be safe to either find their way home or interact with other individuals out in the community. And so I always worry about safety in that aspect too. Safety can also mean within the community, definitely.
And before we get into that, what about people leaving and then not remembering how to get back?
Big problem. Yeah.
Okay.
And that tends to be a very urgent issue.
Yeah.
And there can be some creative solutions to those types of problems. Sometimes if we schedule an individual to go on group walks with the community members and staff members, sometimes a family member or an outside care provider will come in and take an individual. And so you can schedule it so that they don't feel that they need to go out by themselves. But if somebody is in an assisted living community and they're accessing and going outside of the community and walking, and they are not reliable to find their way back, and it's exceptionally dangerous, a very serious safety concern, and something that has to be addressed, pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue.
Okay. And inside, you're getting ready to talk about inside.
Yeah. So inside, safety can be, is someone no longer safe to be in their own apartment behind a closed door?
Yeah.
And so that can bring up a host of issues. Folks that they have a microwave in their apartment, they're not using their microwave appropriately, and catching. I've had popcorn catch on fire and heating pads catch on fire, and then it can be something like an individual turning water on and leaving water running. And so I've seen that as well, where maybe they'll turn water on and walk away, get distracted, leave their apartment. There's water in it, it can eventually cause a small flood. And so those are some safety issues. And then certainly falls within their apartment. If there's somebody that isn't safe to necessarily transfer from one surface to another, a bed to a chair, or a wheelchair to a chair, or a wheelchair to bed, and they need assistance with that task, but they're no longer remembering to call or wait. And so they have some impulsiveness, and they're getting up, unattended, and they're falling over and over and over again. That's a very difficult scenario to manage in assisted living. And there are generally always options and steps you can take and things you can try to problem solve a lot of these situations. Taking a microwave out of an apartment. Sometimes it's just no longer needed and it's not safe. And so these aren't necessarily hard and fast, but there are some things that we start to hear about and we're calling family members about and we're communicating with and we're problem solving. But once they start to add up, and they can't be solved, they can become an issue. Safety, another aspect of safety is, or can be, individuals interacting with each other. Because sometimes when there is some cognitive deficits and maybe a little bit of agitation or anxiety, safety can become an issue when someone is struggling to be safe interacting with others. And so that can come up in a lot of different ways. In a larger community where there's a lot of individuals to interact with, folks can get very overstimulated and agitated and frustrated with certain scenarios. And those types of situations can lead to some safety concerns. Outside of safety, one thing that's really important is the level of actual physical assistance that they need. And so there are limitations within assisted living. And that's a really great question because it can definitely vary from state to state and community to community. And that can be based on your state regulations. That can be based on your community's policies, your community's staffing levels. And so care needs can exceed what an assisted living community is able to support. So somebody needing extensive assistance with transfers or mobility, maybe they need more than one person to assist them with their transfer. Typically, that is going to indicate that they might need a higher level of care beyond an assisted living facility or community.
Yeah, there aren't too many assisted living communities that I'm familiar with that can manage a 2-person transfer. That's a lot of manpower at the same place at the same time for a community to be able to handle. So what kinds of conversations are you having with families once you start to notice some of these red flags about a resident? What does that look like? And just to kind of prepare somebody for things that they may eventually hear about their own loved one.
Yes.
And how soon do you start having those conversations?
I think that those conversations need to be ongoing. They need to start right away. And really, from a nursing perspective, it's my job to be communicating those concerns as they come up. And it might not be that there's anything to try to problem solve or fix at that point in time, but just to be able to discuss what's going on with this individual and what are the concerns. And the sooner that those types of conversations occur and the more open we are as far as a nurse having that conversation with a family member and a family member being receptive to that conversation, the more dialogue that goes on about some of these concerns, the more options we're going to have for trying to solve these problems early on.
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't be in an ideal situation that there's something been going on for an extensive amount of time and you haven't heard about it. That's poor communication. And so if you're curious or if you see some safety concerns with your loved one, definitely don't be afraid to ask about it because some of these things can be solved, problem solved. There should be steps that you can take, to try to problem solve some things and improve safety and getting, outside home health agency in to help out, getting some of that physical therapy in there, looking at equipment, looking at services that are provided to try to meet that individual's needs prior to it becoming an issue. And so the community as well as the family member should be dialoguing about these things. And so don't be afraid to ask just a simple question of your community, which could be, what does it look like when my mom or dad might not be appropriate? And the thing is that we really want to avoid that subject. We don't want to think about it, but it comes sometimes, and it can be unavoidable. And so, trying to stay ahead of those scenarios really is the best thing to do.
And to be proactive and work together as a team with the facility.
Yes.
And just real quickly, if someone is no longer appropriate for assisted living, what next? What are other options? And again, in a general sense, there are some places in the U.S. that don't have certain levels of care that we're used to here in Oregon. So, grain of salt with this one.
Yes. And options sometimes can include just getting a smaller assisted living community.
Okay.
I've seen that where we talk about that in another one of our videos, where somebody's not doing well because maybe the community that they're in is too large for them, and so they're not getting enough eyes on or supervision. And so sometimes it can just be a matter of finding a smaller assisted living community for them. Beyond that, if assisted living is no longer appropriate, regardless of the size of the community, when you have somebody that's maybe wandering outside or has a difficult time interacting with others or falling continuously, they might need a much smaller setting and a higher level of care. And so here in Oregon, one option can be adult foster care.
And adult foster care homes, also known as adult care homes, exist in lots of different areas of the U.S. And we've seen their numbers grow exponentially over the last 10, 20 years. So that will be another video where we deep dive into adult care homes. So sorry, back to you.
So oftentimes the next step from assisted living or a very small assisted living community is going to be a memory care facility.
For people who are cognitively impaired.
They have to have that cognitive impairment. Memory care facilities are a wonderful option. And what we used to know of and think of as memory care has changed dramatically, and so that it's a much smaller setting. It allows for a lot of direct supervision. The staff members in memory care are specifically trained to support and handle the concerns and issues that a memory care challenged older adult can have. They're also secured to make sure that they have access. The individual has some access to usually a garden or some sort of an outside area, but that it's a safe area, it's a secure area, and you're not going to have to worry about them getting lost. And with individuals that have some cognitive issues, that's maybe causing them to be impulsive and not wait for care. A memory care community they have higher staffing, and so the fact that the community is much smaller and they have higher staffing, they can reduce that fall risk just by having a lot of one-on-one, more personalized, supervised care, and so. They can address that issue, and then obviously very aware of dealing with any types of behavioral challenges that might come up. And so memory care is a wonderful option for folks that need that level of care. Beyond memory care, oftentimes an individual with maybe they don't have some significant cognitive impairment or a diagnosis of cognitive impairment, and they're needing a lot of really heavy one-on-one, two-on-one, hands-on physical care, then that's when you're starting to look more towards a nursing home or a nursing community. Yeah,
because they have pretty strict regulations as far as their staffing ratios.
Their staffing ratios. Their caregivers are going to be certified, and so they're going to have special training in how to do those 2-person transfers, and how to care for somebody that's maybe bedbound. They can offer a variety of different types of diets for individuals that have any type of swallowing impairments. And then individuals that have specific nursing needs, where they need a nurse there to manage their insulin and their diabetes, or they need a nurse there to manage maybe skin care or wound care, things like that. So that's when you're definitely having more physical challenges and health concerns that you need actual direct care from nursing staff.
Okay. Great. Thank you for going through that. Last but not least, if I'm a family member and you've come to me, and we've probably been having this conversation for a while, that my grandmother, that assisted living is no longer the right scenario for her, what resources are available to me as a family member to then go out and try to help find that next level of care for her?
And it's very overwhelming. I know, for yourself, it was difficult. You've been in this business for years. I always, tell family members and loved ones, it would be difficult for myself as well. And so really accessing as much support that you can get. Work with the folks that work in your community, and they generally have a marketing or sales department that can oftentimes be a good starting point. And then also the nurses that work in your community have often experienced other communities and have been out in other communities.
Or worked in other communities.
Worked in other communities, absolutely, and can give you some good ideas and suggestions for good things to try. And then working with a placement agency that specifically helps family members find higher levels of care, whether it's assisted living, memory care, a nursing home, to help kind of guide you through that process. And so there's options there. And then sometimes having a conversation with your healthcare in multiple different facilities, and so they'll often have some good suggestions and recommendations, and they would need to be a part of that process of moving to a higher level of care. And so it's a good idea that is when you start having these discussions and you're thinking that this might be something that's on the horizon, to get an appointment with the primary care provider and discuss what types of options your healthcare provider might suggest and feel is appropriate for your loved one.
Yeah, great ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming again and talking through.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Talking through some maybe not so fun pieces of this, but the goal here is to educate our viewers and to give you as much information as possible. So if you have questions or comments, please leave those down below and we will do our best to answer them.
Yes, please do, because we are brushing on very small, amounts of information. So we're here to help.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.